Hey there, everybody. It's Dave and Darren once again after my weekend off. Got to spend some time with the grandkids, but it drove me bananas not being here with you all doing a show. But we have one today. And today we're going to be talking about, first off, the position review. We're going to be talking about the linebackers. And by linebackers, we mean the off-ball guys, inside linebacker types, and the outside linebacker types, or as more often talked about as edges. And we're going to be going over those and how they fit in the long-term plans of the Minnesota Vikings. Then we're going to get on to Brian Flores and what can we expect in his evolution of defense this season. Then we're going to talk about what happened in Vikings land, or those things that are related. One of them is Kirk Cousins. Boo, 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 boo. Along with, we have a young player that got scammed out of almost $250,000. And then we have Ben Solak of ESPN making mistakes once again on his lists. I can't wait till list season's over. But until then, enjoy this Two Old Bloggers next. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. I see everybody in the chat. Welcome to the show. And it seems that the topic to start off with is condiments. What condiment do you like on your hamburgers there, Darren?
Ketchup, mustard, pickles,
okay,
and gotta have some cheese too. Cheeseburger.
Gotcha. Now,
I'm not big on the lettuce and tomato. I don't really care too much about that, but
you don't want to have a salad on your burger? Is that what you're telling me?
No, yeah, something like that. But
okay,
hey, to each his own.
I'm seeing horseradish in here, and I do like horseradish. I do like most everything on a hamburger. It's like pizza. It doesn't matter. Just as long as it's a good burger, I'm happy.
Yes. Horseradish would up the spice meter on the old hamburger for sure.
Yeah, definitely clear out the nasal passages, which could be a good thing. So, all right. We talked about Vikings defensive evolution. I've been on and off researching this for 2 weeks, passing you the notes as well. And we have a friend that we're going to talk about here in the second theme that also dove into this.
Yes.
It's an interesting proposition as we roll in to the 2025 season. But let's start off with part of that defense in theme one. The linebackers. Oops, wrong one.
Not theme two yet.
Nope. Got to hit the right button. All right. And still hadn't hit the right button.
You'll get there.
Oh, I will get there. Here we go. Boom. The linebackers.
We started this a couple of weeks ago on our last show, Dave, where, again, at the end of each season, as a recap, you and I look at each position and kind of look at how are things looking for the next season, who might be staying with the Vikings, who might be going, who might they add in free agency, who might they draft to, how are the various positions looking, and heading into the next season. Well, we've gone through free agency. We've done the draft. The Vikings 90-man roster is pretty much all set, ready to go for training camp. So I thought it was a good exercise to, in a bit of a dead period for the NFL, is to kind of look at long-term, look at each Vikings position, see long-term how the Vikings are set up. Do the guys that are here now and at the various positions, do they have staying power? I mean, are they going to be here long-term? And we did the secondary 2 weeks ago, looking at the cornerbacks and the safeties. And now we're going to look at the linebackers, like you said, off the ball, the inside guys and the edge guys. And again, as a recap, long-term in the NFL, again, is not very long. Average NFL career is 3.3 years and a high amount of turnover every year on rosters, guys coming and going. So, long-term for this and any unit on the Vikings is, you're looking at 2028, basically between 2025 and now. That's about as long-term as you can look. So let's start with the linebackers and looking at them. And we're going to start with the off the ball, the inside guys first. You got them up there. And I'm looking at basing this on, okay, what's the guy's age and what's his contract status? When is he set to be a free agent? And when he is a free agent, how old will he be? And what are the likelihood of the Vikings being interested in extending that player? As you see the off-ball guys, the inside linebacker guys, I think quite a bit of uncertainty there long-term about what we're going to have at inside linebacker, because we've only got two guys there who are locked up until the 2028 offseason. And that's Blake Cashman and Kobe King. And Cashman's getting a little bit older, and King is a guy who I think he's going to make the team, but he's not guaranteed to make the team, Dave, because he's a 6th-round pick, and those guys aren't guaranteed anything, even though scouting reports were very favorable. I know a lot of people who have watched our show and tuned in on the draft coverage for First and SKOL were very high on Kobe King and what he could do. But I think, again, as a 6th-rounder, no guarantee that he can make the team. So everybody else beyond that they're going to be scheduled to be a free agent after this season. And so that includes Ivan Pace Jr., it includes Eric Wilson, who at this point in his career, 31 years old, coming back to Minnesota, but he's basically a guy, no matter where he is right now, he's on a year-to-year basis, whether he's going to be on your team or not. He's not long-term at all, and he's not a guy you're going to be starting. He's a backup guy. So Eric Wilson, basically, is he going to be here after 2025? It's doubtful, I would say. Ivan Pace Jr. is set to be a free agent after this season. He's done very well. I think a lot of Vikings fans are very happy with his play, but no guarantee that he is here beyond 2025. And then Brian Asamoah. He's coming to the end of his rookie deal. He has not been able to carve out a significant role on defense at all. He's actually been buried on the depth chart the past 2 seasons with Ivan Pace Jr.'s emergence in particular. He's doubtful whether he will be able to keep his roster spot coming out of training camp and preseason. I think it's a battle between King and him as to who gets that roster spot. And then beyond those guys, Dave, you've got a bunch of rookies or undrafted rookie free agents they've brought in. Austin Keys, Max Tooley, who is not on a rookie. He's a veteran, but he's been a practice squad guy, reserve guy in the amount of time he's been in the NFL. There's
That's Max Tooley on the left, by the way.
Yeah. There's a Dorian Mousey. I'm not pronouncing that right. Another undrafted rookie free agent. These are depth guys who are looking at best. They might be looking to, at best, make the back end of the roster or maybe the practice squad. Not anybody that you can bank on for long term. So a lot of uncertainty there on the off the ball linebackers long term of what we've got. But I think it could somehow, that in some ways it's not such a big deal, Dave, because at least with the Brian Flores defense, as we know, inside off the ball linebackers, over 60% of the snaps, I would say, there's only one inside linebacker on the field, down after down after down. And last year, that was Blake Cashman. At least we've got him until the 2027 offseason. But I think this will look a bit different in the you just showed Jordan Hicks. He was the guy who was on the field all the time in 2022 and 2023 for the Vikings. And last year, Cashman took over that role, and he likely will be the guy doing it again. But when you're not using you're not using two inside linebackers all the time in the 3-4. I think it's the depth here, the long-term outlook looks a little bit different. You don't worry as much about having 4 or 5 guys who are going to be here all the time because you don't use those guys as much. But I think this outlook of long-term will look a lot different. I think particularly with Ivan Pace Jr. and Kobe King and their development. Ivan Pace Jr., we love how he plays, a bulldog, great blitzer, downhill guy, great against the run, and he's 24 years old. He's young. But pass coverage is not something that he has been, is his strength, and that's why he's not on the field 3 downs all the time, and Blake Cashman is. But if he can show growth in that area and take that next step, and remember, this is just his 3rd year, so he's still learning. He's still improving as a player. There's upside to his game. Then the Vikings, I think, will be, if they can see growth in the pass coverage in particular with Ivan Pace Jr., and he keeps on doing all the other things he does well, then I think the Vikings are going to be very interested in signing him to an extension at some point this season or the off season that keeps him here beyond 2025, and where maybe he transitions into that guy who's on the field all 3 downs, particularly when Blake Cashman's contract is up, and Cashman will be about 31 years old at that point. And do the Vikings keep Cashman at that age or not? That's, I think, highly debatable as you get into your early 30s as an off the ball linebacker. The other thing is Kobe King. Based on the scouting reports we've seen from him at Penn State, another guy, kind of a similar profile to Ivan Pace Jr. in that he's looked at as like a very strong run defender, a thumper. Looks like at best in the NFL, his I think floor anyway is a 2 down linebacker who's not going to be there on obvious passing downs. Has blitzing potential too, but if we don't know if that's going to translate to the NFL level. So this training camp and preseason is going to be big for Kobe King. But if he can show that potential, he can show that he's got the ability to be at least a 2 down linebacker at the NFL level, starter at least for a couple of downs, then you've got him locked up until 2028. And again, if you could have Pace to an extension and Kobe King shows that he's a guy who can be a starter eventually too, when maybe Cashman's a little bit older and you don't want to extend him, then I think the inside linebacker side of things, the long-term depth, the potential there looks a little bit better, but still some uncertainty there, because particularly with Pace, if he doesn't show the growth in pass coverage, but he's a damn good blitzer, very good run defender, can knock guys over. With the Vikings in their salary cap situation next offseason, he could possibly be a guy who he might be looking for a bigger role. Another team might have more cap space and more opportunity to offer Pace, and somebody could sign Pace away from the Vikings, depending on our cap situation and the kind of playing time that we're offering. So I'd love to see Ivan Pace stay as a Viking, but I think there's, depending on how things go this year, money-wise, and how Pace performs, and even Brian Flores' future with the team, if he's still a defensive coordinator. If he isn't, like, how does the defensive system change, and does Pace fit with that change? A lot of things there still to be worked out on whether Pace is a Viking beyond this season. Hope he is, but I think that there are some questions there about whether he is going to be a Viking after this season. But I think off the ball linebacker there, Pace and King are guys that a lot is going to, their development and how they play this year and what they show is going to really form determine a bit about the long-term health of the off-the-ball linebacker situation. I think when we move to edge, the linebacker or the edge guys, Dave, I think that looks a little bit better long-term, because you've got two guys Jonathan Grenard and Dallas Turner, who won't be free agents until the 2028 offseason. And then Van Ginkel won't be a free agent until the 2027 offseason. So you got 3 starters right there, I think, who are locked up for the next couple of seasons, and 2 that are locked up for the next 3. Van Ginkel is a guy he just got an extension, about a month or so ago, but he's just turned 30. He's the guy where I think after this next extension is up, he'd be just turning 32 going into the season. I don't know if he's a guy that the Vikings would want to extend beyond that. It will depend on his health and his production and how long they think they can string that out. But this last extension he got from the Vikings, that could be it for him as a Viking, depending on how things go and what his price point is and all of that sort of stuff. But still, he's got this year and a couple more still in the tank with the Vikings. That's good. And Grenard, 28 years old, he'd be turning 30. He'd be going into his 31 season just as his contract voids in 2028. But depending on his health, Dave, depending on also his production, we have seen edge rushers at age 30 or even a little bit older, like Von Miller, like Khalil Mack, and even like Danielle Hunter last year as he turned 30, be very, very, very productive in their early 30s. So you can see a path where if Grenard keeps on producing like he did last year, 11 and a half, 12 and a half sacks, maybe a little bit more, and he's still playing a lot of snaps and not missing games because of injuries, that the Vikings could look at maybe next year in the offseason or the offseason after that, they could do an Van Ginkel type extension for him, keeping him in Minnesota till the 2029 offseason or maybe even the 2030 offseason. And then Dallas Turner is the big guy here, because if he becomes the player that the Vikings expect him to be, he's going to get a big fat extension in about 3 years' time. And then you'd have him locked up. Van Ginkel would probably be gone, yes, but you'd have him and Grenard signed, sealed, and delivered up until the 2029, 2030 off seasons. And in the NFL, that is forever. and you'd have 2 starters there who are locked up at the edge position and 2 hopefully very productive guys. So that's why I think the edge rusher side of the linebacker situation, long term, we look a lot more solid than we do on the off the ball linebacker type side of things. Now, depth, though, is an issue at edge, because between those 3, and assuming that they stay healthy, the Vikings right now look like they're rolling with 4 guys who are undrafted rookie free agents either last year or this year. So you've got Bo Richter, Gabe Murphy, Chaz Chambliss, and Tyler Batty, who are all fighting to be the number 4 and number 5 edge rushers this year. Now, if the Vikings hit on 1 or 2 of those guys this year and next year, then edge rusher is going to look really good. But you don't know. Murphy and Richter both had very strong training camps. Murphy didn't get to play in the preseason last year, but Bo Richter did and really showed out well during that time and ended up making the team and being a key special teams guy all last year. So there is promise there. We hear good things about Chambliss and Batty, but Batty's 26 already. He's a bit old. But again, if one of those 2 guys can emerge and show that they are worthy of snaps as a number 4 edge rusher, that really solidifies the edge, because we didn't bring back Jihad Ward. We didn't re-sign Patrick Jones III. So there's an opportunity there for those guys to move up the depth chart and take some snaps from these guys, or be able to, move up the depth chart and be maybe not a contributor to the defense this year, but in 2026 and 2027, when maybe Van Ginkel isn't around anymore, then they move up to be your number 3 edge rusher if things work out. But the thing is, we just don't know if they're going to be worth keeping beyond this season, or even for this season at all. But the good thing about it is that the Vikings, if they do one of the 2 of these guys or even more show promise, the Vikings have the ability to keep them beyond this offseason, because Richter and Gabe Murphy will be exclusive rights free agents going into this offseason, which means if the Vikings want to keep them, all they got to do is offer them a 1-year minimum and those boys either got to take the deal or they got to sit out a year. Well, they're not going to sit out a year. So the Vikings basically have got them locked up if they want to. And the other two guys, Chambliss and Batty, again, they could be under rookie deals for 3 years as well if the Vikings want. But it's just a question of, are they going to emerge? Are they going to show that they're worth keeping on the team and that they have the ability to play significant snaps on a regular basis at some point in time in the next year or two? That is the question with the depth. But I think linebacker-wise, edge I feel pretty good about long-term. Off the ball, some questions, but those could be resolved. Again, if Kobe King shows that he's really as good as advertised at Penn State, and if Ivan Pace Jr. shows a little bit more growth in pass coverage, and that he's got the ability to be maybe the green dot guy in 2026 or not 2026 because Cashman will still be there, but 2027.
Gotcha. First off, I want to answer Drew's question. I'm drinking soda. I'm not partaking today because I have a show later tonight, the Fans First football show, and I'll be recording later tonight. There's on the inside linebackers, the off-ball guys.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that we have Blake Cashman locked up. Ivan Pace is a good run stuffer, as I agree with you on there, and his weakness is in pass coverage. But it looks like, at least while Brian Flores is in charge, the pass coverage on both linebackers is not as necessary as it would be in a traditional defense, because he just rotates Josh Metellus in or Dallas Turner, and they cover areas that are traditionally Metellus more than Turner. Turner will cover flats. Metellus can cover over the middle, and you don't need that sort of linebacker if the rotation is good and they're not, expecting a run. It's a, one of those cat and mouse games. So it's going to be interesting because, hey, these guys, you're right. We're hoping on Kobe King, who's nice and young, 22, that he comes in and develops into that nice guy to pair with Pace. Now, I think this is Pace's last year. They'll have him, what you said, restricted. They can keep him another year, and then we'll see what happens after that. There's depth there. I can deal with it. The inside linebacker, I don't think is as important, and because there's only two maximum on the field at any one time, and I think we can get four guys out of that can fill in if needed. Eric Wilson being one of them.
Yes.
Right? So, and Eric Wilson should make his money and bones on special teams this year because that's what he has, but he's competent at inside linebacker as well. Brian,
he had to play a significant amount of snaps for the Packers last year when they had some injuries on inside linebacker, and he did fine. Just as he did fine when he was with the Vikings, when he was a bit younger. But he's a vet that I think you can feel confident at the level of play you're going to get from him. It's just that, is he with the team next year? Well, if he is, it'd be, again, another 1-year deal. Right. There's not somebody that you're looking at 2028. He's going to be there and going to be a major contributor.
Right, exactly. He's just, a mercenary. Yes. End of career mercenary. Easiest way to put him. And we've got a few of those on the team. Then they've got a function, and that's not bad.
Yeah, and every team has them. But yeah, I think with the outside linebackers, one thing I didn't quite mention in my wrap up is that the depth side of thing, Dave. I think the Vikings, by the time they can make the decision or have to make the decision on, if all four of these guys at the bottom end of the depth chart don't pan out this year, I think Richter in particular, I feel pretty confident about that he could have some staying power at the Vikings, particularly with his special teams work that he does. Mm-hmm. But, the Vikings can I think, deal with this. They have time in 2026 and 2027 to either through free agency or the draft to address the edge. And they're going to have to, because that's such an important part of the 3-4, particularly the 3-4 that Brian Flores runs. You got to have lots of good players that you can run through there and be able to affect the quarterback, particularly rushing the passer.
Yep, it's all about the rotation and keeping them fresh. And how we'll get into here momentarily how Flores uses them as pieces to cause havoc. But yes, you're 100% correct. And speaking of Brian Flores and causing havoc, now we're on to theme 2. New tricks.
Indeed. Somebody was saying I'm drinking Molson's or Labatt's, but Dave, as you know, I am not a big fan of the Budweiser version of Canadian beer. So I'm not drinking Labatt's. I'm drinking Steamworks out of Vancouver, BC, British Columbia. I wouldn't call it a microbrewery because it's pretty big, but they make some nice, tasty IPAs.
Medium brewery.
Yes, medium brewery. But on to more defense talk, Dave. And looking at Brian Flores, the evolution of the Vikings defense under him, you talked a little bit about it, but as we were researching this has seems like a pretty popular topic amongst a lot of Viking sites. As I was doing a little bit of research last night and the day before, several articles, columns, podcasts devoted to this subject. And so, but it brought up because you sent me an email about this. You and Tyler talked about this earlier in the week on First and SKOL on the Real Forno show. But, since Brian Flores became our defensive coordinator in 2023, he's done what we wanted him to do. He took a defense that hemorrhaged points and yards under Ed Donatel in 2022, and he's turned it into a defense that, can actually stop offenses, can actually sack quarterbacks on a regular basis.
What a shocker.
Yes.
I almost posted, I had a slide that with Brian's picture and can he turn this defense around is what we did a few years ago. Anyways.
Yes. He's been able to do all of those things. I think if there's a criticism about him or about the Vikings defense is that they have, I feel the past 2 years have, they haven't been able to keep up the level of play, sustain that level of play as the season wore on. Teams seem to figure out what Flores was doing and found some counters and ways to attack what he was doing as late in the season, and we're able to move the ball on the Vikings more than we'd been seeing earlier in the season and score more points than we'd been seeing earlier in the season. So I think the question is, Dave, when you're looking at this Brian Flores defense, and he's in his third year here as defensive coordinator, what is he going to do differently or better that will allow the Vikings defense to be better longer in 2025 than they have been in 2024, in 2023? Because last year, if you remember, the first half of the season in 2024, like Aaron Schatz from the former Football Outsiders, the Vikings defense was at a historically great level as far as their defensive DVOA rankings. They just couldn't keep that up. And so what can we expect? What's Flores going to do that could get us to a point where they're playing even better, again, longer in 2025 than they were last year? And so we don't get situations where you give up 25 points, 31 points, and 27 points in your final 3 games of the season, 2 of those which were losses. And the final loss ended the Vikings season, and the one before that ended their chances of being the number 1 seed in the NFC North. I think there are, a few things that you probably will see. And the first thing is I think, what we might see a little bit differently is that Brian Flores is going to, I think you're going to see more man coverage this year than you have in the past with the Vikings under Brian Flores. And when Flores last year in 2024, this might surprise some people or not, but the Vikings had ran man coverage 22% of the defensive snaps. That was the 8th fewest percentage in the NFL. And that really runs counter to how Flores ran things when he was head coach in Miami and running the defense there, where they were known for blitzing the shit out of everybody, which is Brian Flores is still doing here. But they also did a lot of cover zero, press man stuff married with that blitzing. He hasn't been doing that with the Vikings. They've been a very zone heavy team as far as coverages, but I think the reason he has done that is because he didn't feel he had the players in the secondary to play man coverage. But that's gradually been changing, Dave. It starts with the signing of Isaiah Rodgers this year. Pro Football Focus had him as a top 5 guy in man coverage last year. Granted, not as many snaps as a lot of other cornerbacks, but in the 300 and so snaps he had with the Eagles, top 5 is in man-to-man coverage. Byron Murphy Jr. last year signed to a big extension. He was above average, according to PFF, in man coverage last year. Mekhi Blackman coming off the ACL, but coming out of USC and Colorado was known, even though he's like 5'10 and 183 pounds or whatever he is, not a big guy. He was, the scouting report said, very strong, very sticky, and coverage can play man coverage very well. And I think we saw where he makes great plays on the ball as a rookie with the Vikings. So there's promise there. And Jeff Okudah, the much maligned guy that we brought in from Atlanta last year as a free agent, he's been at his best, and Justin Jefferson will tell you this, when he can get in a wide receiver's face, get his hands on you, and beat you up and be physical at the line of scrimmage in man-to-man coverage. You ask him to play zone, maybe not so good, but get in a wide receiver's face and be physical, Jeff Okudah, that's where he's at his best. And those are the top 4 cornerbacks that the Vikings have right now, it looks like, on the depth chart. And all of them have the ability to play man coverage better than particularly Shaq Griffin did last year, and even Stephon Gilmore at his advanced age. At one point in time, Gilmore was a lockdown man-to-man guy, but he's not that anymore, and he wasn't last year. So I think that change in personnel, which has gradually happened over the past couple of years, Brian Flores is going to feel more comfortable playing man-to-man more often than he has the previous 2 years. And that could have its advantages, Dave, because with the Vikings and the blitz packages that they've run, when they've run a lot of zone coverage, even though they try to disguise it, the Detroit Lions did this masterfully in the past 2 seasons. They found ways to counteract that. But man-to-man coverage could help prevent or be an antidote to some of the zone beaters that teams like Detroit have been using, like the short slants or the quick screens to wide receivers that you can use to beat zone coverage when you get blitzed, don't work as well when you're blitzing, but you're using man-to-man coverage. So that could be one thing that I think is different, and if the Vikings do it well, it would allow them to have a defense that I think can sustain the level of play we've seen early in the season the past 2 years, but maybe not so much later in the season. I think a second thing that it's not different, but I think could help with Brian Flores' defense, and we know one thing won't change under Brian Flores is that he wants to dictate what the offense does. He doesn't want to be dictated to. He wants to create confusion with like how many guys he's lining up at the line of scrimmage, which is 3, 4, 5, or 6. Everybody, who is blitzing, who isn't, when are they blitzing, when are they not, and disguising coverages. Is it zone? Is it man? It looks like man, but it's zone. It looks like zone, but then it turns into something else. He wants to force offenses and quarterbacks to communicate throughout the snap count and, really cause a lot of mental stress to quarterbacks and offensive coordinators. And that leads to turnovers. It leads to, offenses going out of the plays that they want and going into something else that might not be as successful. And it leads to, negative plays or plays that don't earn a lot of yards. And all of that helps the defense. Brian Flores is always going to want to do that and be the dictator, not be dictated to. And one way he's been able to do that is, this has gone back since his days in New England, is he likes players who are what he calls multiple. They can do multiple things. And that means, he's got likes players who maybe they're a linebacker or a safety, but you don't know if the safety's actually going to be playing safety, or are they going to blitz, or are they going to cover a slot wide receiver, or are they going to play somewhere in the intermediate zone as a linebacker? In 2023, he had Harrison Smith as a multiple guy, and then he unleashed Josh Metellus on the world as another wild card multiple guy. 2023, the Vikings added Andrew Van Ginkel, another guy who they use in multiple ways: inside, dropping coverage, off edge linebacker, rushing, or maybe not. And I'd also argue that Blake Cashman is a bit of that kind of multiple guy too, where maybe he doesn't play on the line of scrimmage as a glorified defensive lineman, but again, they use him as a blitzer a lot, but he also plays in pass coverage a lot. He can do multiple things. You don't know what things that Brian Flores is going to have him do a lot of times. This past offseason, the Vikings free agent signings, and in particular, like Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Isaiah Rodgers, they're not going to be doing, I think, multiple things like Van Ginkel can do or Blake Cashman can do. But remember, the drafting of Dallas Turner last year, a bit of not a redshirt year for him, but a learning year for him. But the Vikings Brian Flores was training him to be a multiple guy too, not just rushing the passer all the time, but somebody who could be dropping into coverage and covering tight ends, when you don't expect. A guy that you're going to use, yes, off the ball and rushing the quarterback, but also inside in those NASCAR packages that Brian Flores likes to use. So Turner is another multiple guy. And if you count all those guys up, Dave, that's about 5 guys that I would call multiple on the Brian Flores defense right now. 5 guys that offensive coordinators and quarterbacks, they're not going to know exactly what they might be doing from one play to the next. And I think that when you've got that many guys with creating that much uncertainty amongst offenses, that gives Flores a lot of options to be multiple and to mess with offensive coordinators' minds and quarterbacks' minds, and doing different things. And I think that especially if Turner takes that next step or two this year, you've just got a lot of options on defense that Flores can employ and create a lot of chaos for offenses in the NFL. And I think that's a good thing for the Vikings defense and a bad thing for offenses who are facing the Vikings defense. The final thing I think will make potentially has the potential to make the Vikings defense better than it has been the previous 2 years under Flores. And I don't know how this will manifest itself in differences that the Vikings do, because if people remember in the mandatory minicamp press conference that Brian Flores did, he got asked this question about, well, what's next? Like, what's the new thing that you're going to be doing? And he said, well, probably not a lot. He might be lying a little bit there, Dave, because he's not going to tip his hand. But I think, in 2023, a lot of the players he had at his disposal were still a lot of guys that had been brought in for the Ed Donatel type defense that the Vikings had. Last in the 2024 offseason, the Vikings added Cashman, Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, and this offseason, they've added some more, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, in particular to address the interior defensive line. Isaiah Rodgers has been another guy that they've added, again, with more man-to-man coverage abilities. I think Flores now, in year 3 as a defensive coordinator, he has more of what I would call his guys on defense. So not only does he have more talented players, I think, at his disposal, but the skill set fits what the kind of defense that he wants to run and the things that he wants to do. And so I think that when you've got more talented players, yes, of course, your defense should be better, but also when that talent matches their skills match what you want to do as a defense, that also helps with the the performance on the field. And so I think with Flores getting more of his guys and guys who are better fit for his type of 3-4 or 4-3 or whatever he's running particular on any particular snap, I think it's just going to lead to a more effective and better defense for the Vikings in 2025 than we've seen the previous 2 years. And again, better for longer, especially late in the season when you're playing the better teams, especially in the playoffs, and you need that defense to be locked down. I think that, things are trending up for that. And we know that this defense is going to have to be better than it has been this season because you got a lot of really good quarterbacks and a lot of really good offenses that we are playing. And I don't think we want J.J. McCarthy in his first year as a starter having to score 35 points to win a game.
It would be nice that he could do that on a regular basis. But yes, you don't want to have him do that.
No. And like I said, this has been a popular topic. I would suggest if you're looking for somebody else's opinion on what might be different or might be coming in 2025 with the Vikings defense under Flores, check out the Daily Norseman site. Warren Ludford just put up an article yesterday about this exact topic, and he had some thoughts. And Dave, I think you have some thoughts too on what you think we might see different from Flores this year that we didn't see in previous years, or could lead to improvement in this unit compared to 2024.
Oh, without a doubt. And like I said, I've been looking at this for about 2 weeks now. And it's, everybody seems to be, and that's what it is. Listen to podcasts about it and the whole works. About one I heard, and it may have been a New York Times reporter, not Lewis, but somebody else, said that they love Flores because Flores is so far ahead of everybody else. He's like he's in a time machine. He's gone 10 years ahead and, figured out what the offenses are doing it, and he's figuring out how to stop it today. Mm-hmm. Now, he obviously came up with different ways of doing that. And it evolved over time from his time in New England to where he developed a man-heavy scheme. He also believed in the deception, and we'll get into that. He loves to mess with opposing offenses' minds. Part of that's deception. Time down in Miami where he used the man coverage a lot. Because if you're going to blitz a lot, what you're doing with the blitzing is you're taking back, somebody for the average viewer, football viewer, you're sending one more guy than you have could be in coverage. So you got to cover one of two ways, either man on or zone. And if you can man up somebody and disrupt them early, that helps. Now, what we found out last year is that, especially towards the end, if his defense is going against a seasoned quarterback, just like we're seasoned bloggers, if he's going against a seasoned quarterback, i.e. Stafford or Goff, which he had the two problems with, they know that if they're seeing blitz and a blitz comes, not just that they're seeing blitz, but that a blitz comes, and they see that, they're going to get rid of the football fast. Mm-hmm. The way to beat a blitz is to throw over its head, right? If you got 6 guys coming at you, that means somebody's open back there. But it's got to be quick. There's no time for a long pass to develop. It's got to be quick. Boom, boom, get it out. Well, they know that. Well, we're playing great quarterbacks this season, more of them. And so he's got to be able to counter that. How do you counter that? Well, to stop that, you leave more guys back in pass coverage and hope you get pass rush from the interior, which we did not have last year, thus Hargrave and Allen. And so this year might even look a little bit more conventional with less blitzing because of that. It all depends on who we play. He literally game plans the defense, for every single team, which is different than most defensive coordinators. I mean, yes, they all do game plans, but what it does is most defensive coordinators go, I have my system. We're going to play my system against whoever we're playing all season long. I'll make a tweak here and a tweak there to whoever, go against whatever wide receiver or whatever quarterback or whatever running back. I'll make, the necessary adjustments there, but we're playing my system. What this man does is he reworks it every single week versus who he's playing, right? Whether it's a 3-4, 4-3 base, or, he starts getting in and blitzes. If it's a young quarterback, tons of zone coverage to confuse him. If it's a seasoned quarterback, he wants the ability to man up. Thus, we got faster in the corner room this year and more physical. He needs to do that. He wants to be able to play however he wants. Now, we're talking about deception. He uses deception a lot. And what we mean by deception is he lines up players in places that don't make logical sense to somebody that grew up playing football. It's like, what's Josh Metellus doing at defensive tackle? That doesn't make sense, right? That we had from last year. And he wants his players to know what everybody's responsible for, so they can, and then develop them to play in all those different spots. And the more spots you can, the more valuable you become, because you can move it around like pieces on a chessboard, and you feint that, hey, I'm covering the right side of the field, so the quarterback says, well, right side's blocked, I'm going to throw left. And the whole time you've just been baiting them. Mm-hmm. Boom. Interception, pick six, Vikings go ahead. That's what he loves to do. And he loves to drive young people absolutely crazy. Young quarterbacks, young offensive coordinators, everybody wants to go nuts. And how he lines people up on the line, he even does it. There's LaFleur and the whole Stafford, or LaFleur and the other coach, young coach, where they use movement a lot on the offense. That's gone. Yeah, it's gone to the defense now. And this guy's a master of it, where he's moving players constantly. Well, if you are calling pass blocking and everybody's moving, yeah, you can say this guy's the Mike, and then you set everybody on the offense. These are the rules. You go, these three go this way. These two got one man on man, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly it shifts. And you don't have time to react. You're messed up. Or if it's just constantly moving and they're not knowing, okay, who's got what? They got to develop whole new rules to handle what he's trying to do. He's dictating, like you said, he likes to dictate versus react. The whole game of football has always been a tit for tat. Offense figures out a way to beat the defense. Offense wins, right? And they go in and they start doing things that way. And until the defense counters how to figure out how to beat that offense, take it from the smash mouth running of the 90s, where we had, the development of the option play comes from the wing T, goes to the T, goes to the wishbone, goes to an inverted wishbone, goes to the veer, all those different things, and how defenses had to counter them. And they did big linebackers and they smash mouth, because running backs, as I talked to Drew today, he goes, yeah, all you needed was, big linebackers to smash. You carried cared about the tailback and you stopped the tailback. And you had, certain wide receivers and they were going out this way. Well, now it's all different things with the wide receivers to do things, the running backs doing different things and all this, and it's to beat the defense. Well, Flores is staying a step ahead and trying to beat the offense, and that's the way he'll do it. And I think it will reap benefits. But like you said, for 2025, because we got Hargrave and we got Allen, I think we're going to see a little bit less blitzing, even though he loves to blitz. And that'll be good, especially against the older quarterbacks. But I think we're going to see new stuff that we hadn't seen and gone, wait a minute. Tyler always talked about, hey, it was first, NASCAR package or the Bengal front, or I learned about the tight front, which came out of BYU here a couple years ago. It's all about disguising it and getting numbers, and then not just numbers, not numbers for numbers' sake. We remember back in the 90s, how do you stop the running back besides the big linebackers? You bring up a safety. You got 8 guys in the box. Oh, no, Adrian Peterson's here. He runs through 8 guys in the box. Well, let's bring up a 9th guy in the box. Well, it's not necessarily about the numbers. It's about leverage and how he can manage the players to be in the proper leverage. So anybody that's outside the leverage doesn't matter because you're not in the play.
Yeah.
But to leverage those in and be good. That's what we're going to see, that I think we're going to see this year, is more of that, the mixing up and the utilization of that, along with the disguising, because, hey, we open up Monday night against the Chicago Bears. We got a young quarterback that hesitates, and when he does, likes to get sacked. I fully expect that to continue in week 1 and see Caleb Williams curled up in the fetal position because what Brian Flores is doing. They've improved their offensive line. They got Drew Dahlman at center. I think Drew Dahlman's going to be like, oh my God, what did I step into? And it's all going to be because of this man, Brian Flores, and what he does. And then he's going to be high value either right after the season, become his own head coach if somebody's willing to, if the league's willing to, although that's a whole different story. But I think we're in store for a top 5 defensive unit throughout the season, because I think he's built it up with enough people capable of doing everything he wants, not just most of what he wants, and that's going to be scary.
Drew talking about in a decade, everybody was running like a 4-7 defense because, big heavies is kind of leaving the game a bit, and you need speed and mobility. I think I wouldn't be. I think that he's right in a way, but the game shifts all the time too, Dave. Like what's new is old, and that sort of thing. And offenses are going to attack that by going heavy and overpowering you, which is kind of what the Eagles did last year in a way.
Yep.
Now you need the offensive line to pull that off, but yeah,
and the running backs.
Yeah. I've said this a few times where in the CFL, although it's not as wide open as it used to be at the Canadian Football League, but because of the size of the field and that, like safeties and guys who are safeties in the NFL, if they can't make the NFL, they become linebackers in the CFL, and bigger linebackers become like interior defensive linemen in the CFL. So I could see where that sort of philosophy is seeping into the NFL, but again, offenses are going to, and they already starting to adjust to the, going for lighter boxes and lighter defenders to attack that. See, if you're going to put a 215-pound linebacker on the field who's really a safety, well, I'm going to run a 350-pound offensive lineman and a 280-pound tight end at him, and I'm going to run him over. Yeah. So, but it, like you said, chess match, yin and yang, and how do how do you react to how the offense has reacted to what you're doing, and how do you counter that? It's fascinating stuff. But I think Flores is if you want to be confident, I'm confident that he will find a way to make a defense work no matter what the offense is doing over a long period of time.
He's proven it so far. And the one area that needed fixed last year, he's fixed. Or
Exactly.
Promised to with players.
Yeah, potentially, it looks like they did the best they could to address it. Other than,
especially through free agency, but also in the draft. So
yes,
I'm happy. I can't wait. I think this man's a genius, a defensive genius, and it's going to be nothing but glorious if everybody stays healthy, if it works.
And that is the big thing that you cannot predict, and every team has to, as much as Chris Collinsworth says this all the time, Drew will laugh at this because he hates Collinsworth, and a lot of people do, but he talks about when people ask him late in the season who's going to be in the Super Bowl, he always asks, well, tell me who's going to be the healthiest. And that does make a big difference.
Well, I know Biggs is worried about Allen and Hargrave.
No, he said it multiple times in the chat already. Yeah. And it is a concern, but I guess my feeling is that their injuries were one-time injuries. It's not like they've been consistently banged up year after year after year. So I feel like it's a risk, it's a concern, but they aren't guys who've been chronically injured the past few years. So I feel less concerned about it. I feel like the injury luck might hit us for other players, not on those guys, but we don't know.
Thank you, funny boy. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
We need to trade Hawkinson.
Well, the Jets are going to do that.
Sauce would be nice, but I don't think that's going to happen. No. But we'll see. And we were great against the run last year. Now he's with Hargrave and Allen, a little bit more pass pressure. It's going to be interesting how the run game goes. We'll talk about it, next week? We talk with the defensive line, how that rotations go. But we still have some run stuffers that are part of that rotation that'll work as well. And those are going to be key because of the teams like Philadelphia that are going, and Detroit that have gone to the run game. Yeah, the Chargers this year, without a doubt. So it's going to be interesting to see. Well, that brings us to our final theme. Theme
3.
This week in Vikings land.
Well, I love this first topic we're going to talk about. Just when you thought it was safe to just talk about the Vikings quarterbacks now and not talk about past quarterbacks or quarterbacks we could have had, Netflix drops their quarterback series last week in the first episode, and we're back to talking about past Vikings quarterbacks because on that first episode, Kirk Cousins in his comments revealed that he felt misled by the Atlanta Falcons because after he signed a big 108.
This ESPN clip was from last year.
Yeah. So, he felt misled after signing with the Falcons to a big fat free agent contract. And then the Falcons went a few weeks later and they drafted Michael Penix, number 8 overall. And And I'm not going to, and of course, this has been talked about all week on just about every Falcons, NFL, Vikings podcast, whatever. So, but we got to talk about it because it's fun to talk about. But I'm not gonna rip on Cousins for whining about this. Nobody cares that you felt misled after you signed 180 million 4-year deal with 100 million guaranteed. But my thoughts on this are twofold. One is thank you Atlanta for misleading Kirk Cousins, because I think it was, the Vikings did have some interest in bringing him back. Kevin O'Connell in particular really loves Kirk Cousins. And under Kevin O'Connell, Kirk Cousins had played the best football of his career, probably. And I think O'Connell had some interest in bringing Cousins back at least for a year. But, like Cousins said, he wasn't interested in doing the 1-year type deal. He wanted more security than that, more of a commitment than that. And the Vikings made it clear that we'd like you back, but it's really on a one to year basis. So, I thank you, Atlanta Falcons, for making the Vikings decision much easier by dropping $180 million on the table. There's no way Kirk Cousins is going to refuse that. Even though he said in his Netflix that if he had known that the Falcons were going to draft a quarterback early, like Penix in the first round, that might have changed his decision. He might have foregone the $100 million guaranteed and signed back with Minnesota. That would not have happened.
He and his wife loved it in Minnesota.
They loved it in Minnesota. Yes. That would not have happened, but that made the decision just so much easier for the Vikings, so they could move on from Kirk Cousins. And that's good because, Kirk Cousins played some good football for the Vikings, but the Vikings weren't going anywhere significant with Kirk Cousins. We learned that over 6 years with him. So they had to cut the cord, and the Atlantic Falcons gave Kirk Cousins $180 million to have that cord cut. and so thank you, Atlanta Falcons. Not only did you screw up your own salary cap situation, and that's one less team that the Vikings have to worry about in the NFC, but you solved a problem for the Vikings, which maybe they were trying to solve anyway. But if you'd brought Kirk Cousins back for 1 year at what slightly reduced rate, the Vikings weren't going to offer, pay him what the Falcons paid him. But that still would have been a significant amount of our salary cap that would have been eaten up by Kirk Cousins. And so maybe because of that, you don't get to sign Van Ginkel. Grenard, or you would have been able to sign one of those guys or two of those guys, but probably not all three. And maybe you don't have the money to bring in Stephon Gilmore at the end of training camp, who ended up being a key contributor to the defense. Like there's a lot of things that freeing up that cap allowed the Vikings to do in free agency. And all of these guys, 4 guys I just mentioned, were key contributors to a 14-3 season that the Vikings had, which is better than the Vikings had in any year Kirk Cousins played for us. And, got us within one win of a number 1 seed in the NFC North and an NFC North title. So thank you, Atlanta, for doing that. I think the other thing that this wasn't mentioned in the Netflix documentary, Dave. It was actually mentioned. Cousins talked about it in the Scoop City podcast that Diana Rossini and Chase Daniels, the former NFL quarterback, run. Is he said that KOC told him that if Kirky re-signed with the Vikings, that KOC didn't foresee the Vikings drafting a quarterback at all in the 2024 draft. Okay, bullshit. I'm not going to call Cousins a liar, but I feel like he is.
I heard him on a different deal where he said Cousins even was told by the Vikings they're drafting a quarterback this year.
Maybe he misheard or misinterpreted, or he's just butthurt or whatever. But let's look at things, Dave. Like this is just hard for me to believe that KOC would tell him that, because just look at the 2024 NFL draft. That's been considered one of the strongest quarterback class in a long time. The Vikings, because of how they finished that season, had the number 11th overall pick in that draft. And they'd also traded for Houston's 23 overall pick in the first round. So they had the ammo going into that draft to be a player and get a top QB prospect in that draft class that could be the franchise guy for a long time. I don't think that, that.
Yes, so Chevy, we owe him. What a way to pay him back.
And if you look at how that class performed last year, it's looking like it could be one of the all-time best QB classes ever, based on Daniels, even Drake May. Caleb Williams had his struggles, but he showed some things. And Bo Nix's, how he played. Panic showed some good things at the end of the year. And we still have to see what McCarthy has to do. But the Vikings could not... that those kind of classes don't come around very, very often. The Vikings could not be sure that in 2025 or 2026, they wouldn't know when you'd get another class where you'd have 4 or 5 or 6 quarterbacks who could be your franchise guys as ever again. They don't know how long that's going to be. It was in 2024. So I don't see any way where they could have, with the draft capital that they had, the quarterback situation that they had, that they're going to punt on that class just if Kirk Cousins signs. Because just look at the 2025 draft, Dave. Cam Ward's the number 1 overall pick. I feel quite confident that in 2024, if he'd had the year he'd had last year at Miami, I think he's the 7th quarterback picked in that draft, behind Bo Nix. Mm-hmm. And he is the number 1 pick in this draft. There's a lot of drafts like that. So to think that Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings, were not going to draft J.J. McCarthy or somebody else in the 2024 draft because Kirk Cousins was signing for 1 year an extension, it's just laughable to me that would be, and it's not a good way to operate your franchise. And I'm glad that the Vikings did not go that route.
Oh, you and me both.
Yeah.
I was celebrating. It was wonderful. Welcome to the show, Barber. We're just into theme 3.
Yeah.
But this week, the all tears, I'm just laughing. I think it's great. Now, we'll see how he does this year. Right now, he is sitting the bench behind,
Penix.
And we'll see how Penix does, because Penix can come out there and choke it up, and then he'll be back in.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see how he does. He's getting older, right?
He turns 37 in August.
Yeah.
Something in August.
And it, generally takes a couple of years to recover from an Achilles fully. Let's see how that does. It's slower. We heal slower as we get older, as we both know. It is what it is. I found it quite amusing when the news broke that he was boo-hooing over the whole, well, if they would have done that, I would have stayed in Minnesota. Yeah. He's all about the green, and that he's good at.
The best ever.
Yeah, right. And so be it. He sets up his, family for at least a couple generations if he plays it right.
Yes.
So we'll see. All right. From one pleasant moment to an unpleasant one.
Yeah, everybody would have read about, we marvel at the money that athletes make these years, in these type of days, Dave. But we heard this week about, the Vikings, Dallas Turner, having a financial issue that wasn't very positive, and that turns out he was victim of a scam, a fraudulent scam, and got bilked out of $240K Exactly. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune has reported on this first, and and the story goes that somebody called Turner. They got his phone number somehow, personal information, and said they were a JP, Morgan Chase bank employee, and said that they claimed that somebody had impersonated him at an Arizona branch of the bank and was trying to do a wire transfer, and then told Turner that, to prevent this from happening, you need to transfer $120,000 each to two different of these businesses. Right. And so Turner did that. And that ended up being the the fraudulent scam, and the scammers got him. Now, apparently the Vikings and the NFL give rookies, players, training on this sort of stuff. So I guess Turner either slept through that training or he didn't listen to it very closely, because I know I mentioned this the odd time. In my line of work, I'm a bureaucrat, Dave, with the government. Governments are frequent targets for online phishing scams for ransomware attacks, and several governments have been nailed on these ransomwares because just one employee clicks on a link after an email they get. So this thing that happened to Turner is like right out of the 101 playbook of online scams, where somebody emails you or phones you up and says something disastrous is, urgent action needs to be required from you. So you got to download this link, or, send money to this certain, website or link to prevent something disastrous from happening, like, being locked out of your bank account or whatever. And what you're taught is that you get this email or phone call, immediately hang up or delete the phone call and send the email to your chief information officer so they can deal with it and warn others. Turner did not do that. And so,
or at least minimum, if he actually thought they were from the bank, say, hey, I'll call the bank.
Yeah. It doesn't make.
Thank you for letting me know. I'll call the bank and confirm, and call a totally different number.
Exactly.
And they'll call Chase Bank, and Chase Bank will go, what? No.
Yes.
You're being scammed.
Yeah.
Oh, good catch. Thanks. And it's done. And he's got $240,000 more in his wallet.
Mm-hmm. Now, Turner's scheduled to make, I think, $1.5 million this year on his, guaranteed on his deal. So $240,000 doesn't, depending on what his other responsibilities are, it doesn't mean he's going to go broke or he's in debt, but it's not an insignificant amount of money. Like, that's about 2 years' salary for me, maybe more. It's just a painful lesson for Dallas Turner to learn. And because these young athletes, all athletes actually, the amount of money they make, they are targets for these sorts of things, heavy targets for these sorts of things. And I think it's a painful lesson for Turner to learn. Like you said, Dave, I don't know what he told his bank when he went in there, but I feel like they should have like clued into
why are you taking out this money? Why are you doing this wire?
Why are you sending the wire to two businesses who aren't affiliated with our bank? And that's going to stop the fraud. Like, I don't know. But again, bank tellers sometimes have only been there a week or so as well. So, I don't know what he told him, but painful lesson for him to learn. Maybe the only good thing that could come out of this, if there is that Turner is so pissed off that he lost $240,000 that he's going to be like super motivated, have a monster 15 sack season, and then he makes the Pro Bowl and hits a whole bunch of incentives where he makes that money back and more.
Yep. Hey, I'm all for it. Hopefully he does.
Yes.
Because it is a rough lesson to learn, and he's going to be asked about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he's going to be ribbed about it. And it makes you wonder, hey, if you're supposedly smart, why aren't you smart? Why did you let this go by? It is something. And Bulldog says, hey, most players don't understand their careers are short and they need to bank it and keep it, just like humans do. I think it was Biggs that said, hey, the hard part isn't making the money, it's keeping the money. And that's true. Amen. I can attest to that. But it's interesting, and the scams are getting more and more in depth. And it's not just for a scam of ransomware. When I was in the military, it was access to the system, spyware. They were looking to spy on, obviously, in the military to get advantage that way. But it was, you got to be smart. Don't open those links. Don't do, all those things they tell you to do. And be smart about it. And if it smells fishy, it probably is.
Exactly. And some folks in the comments, providing some of the examples that they've had in their lives of similar type scams. Like everybody gets them. And some people who haven't, they react to the urgent calls for action and it ends up costing them a lot of money. And
Yep. And whole now with the AI stuff, they can scam you and, have a kid call and go, Dad, I need this. I'm kidnapped, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you have a family, secure word to prove that it's legit. So, all right, now to the final segment where we talk about this young guy, Mr. Ben Solak of ESPN, getting some things right and some things wrong.
Yeah, this is the year, Dave, again, with that dead period before the training camps start, where you start getting these lists, who are the top 10 linebackers in the NFL, or the top 10 quarterbacks, or the top 10 this, or the top 100 this. NFL Network came out with its top 100 players. Andrew Van Ginkel made it, which I think is well-deserved. So clap up for him. But Solak had an interesting one on ESPN, but you could only read it if you've got ESPN Plus, I believe. So, but he did an exercise where he looked at, he tried to determine who were the best picks at each draft slot 1 through 262 of the common draft era, which he considered from 1967 until now. And these lists are fun, Dave, because it creates a lot of debate, of course. And is this guy who's slotted in this position, is he really the best ever? Solak admitted that he didn't have like a analytical, big special formula where to make his picks. He just looked at who was the most successful and who he felt were the most dominant after poring over every draft from 1967 until last year's 2024 draft. And he came up with his list. The good news is that there were a lot of Vikings on the list, 13 in fact. And I was going to check to see if that was the most of any NFL team. It was probably pretty close. There are a lot of Vikings on there. I think, of course, so he got a lot of guys on there, and some of them are obvious, some not so obvious. Also, I think he missed a couple of opportunities to add some Vikings on there, and we'll talk about that. But let's just get into who were these 13 players that made the list and the rankings of the best picked at their particular slot. Going to go through them all here. The first one, the top pick at number 7 overall, and the Vikings were very well represented in the first round, by the way. They got 4 guys of the top picks in the first round. Adrian Peterson, drafted 7th overall, 2007. Solak considers him to be the best 7th overall pick ever in the common draft era. Don't know if we want to disagree with that. Next up, maybe no surprise, Mr. Alan Page, 1967, 15th overall in the first round, considered the best 15th pick at 15th overall in NFL in the common draft era. I don't think anybody could have any argument about that, certainly not amongst Vikings fans. Next up, again, I don't think there's going to be much argument here. Randy Moss, old 84, considered by Solak the best pick at number 21st, at the 21st slot, and he was picked 21st overall in 1998. Coming after him, just one pick later, Mr. Justin Jefferson, considered by Solak to be the best pick at the 22 slot in the common draft era. So that's where I say the Vikings are well represented in the first round, Dave, and those are names that everybody knows quite well in Vikings land. I think after this, these are where things I think get very interesting and kind of unearth some players who are very significant contributors to the Vikings, but maybe a bit overlooked in the past. The next guy that makes the list, Second round, Solak considers him the best pick at the number 39 slot. He was picked in 1969. The great Drew Bunting will love this. The great Ed White guard.
Ed White was brilliant and is a brilliant artist, by the way.
Yes. And you can follow him on Facebook. Dave's a friend of Ed White.
Yes.
But Ed White is considered the best 39th overall pick in the common draft era. So big ups for Mr. White. After him, at 100, took a while. In the fourth, Everson Griffin, considered the best pick at number 100 overall. And Ev was picked in the fourth round at 100 overall in the 2010 draft. So a little bit of recognition for Everson Griffin there. A great Viking indeed, and hopefully he's doing well with his mental health challenges these days. Haven't really heard too much about that, but we wish the Griff well. Following him, at 167, considered the best pick at 167 slot, Bobby Bryant, cornerback, picked in the 7th round back in the 1967 draft, which also produced Alan Page. And several weeks ago, I think we considered the 1967 draft to be the greatest draft for Vikings of all time, particularly because of Bryant and Alan Page being picked in that draft. Two guys in the top 50 in the Ring of Honor, et cetera, et cetera. And Bobby Bryant probably should be in the Hall of Fame, but is not. In the Solak's best pick at the 173rd spot, Matt Burke, picked in the 6th round at 173 in the 1998 draft that also produced Randy Moss. So Matt Burke getting some love there. After him, one of my favorite Vikings of all time, considered the best pick by Solak at 186, Mr. Carl Lee, shutdown corner, picked in the 7th round out of Marshall in 1983, and had a great career with the Vikings, and was one of my favorite players. Now we're getting down to the obscure guys. Solak's best pick at the 220 slot, and who would have thunk this? Shamar Stephen, big old nose tackle, defensive tackle. He was picked in the 7th round at slot 2020 in the 2014 draft, and he started a few years under the Mike Zimmer defenses out of the University of Connecticut. Our Facebook friend Chuck Falconeri would love that, as Chuck is a UConn grad. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. At 227, Solak's best pick at that slot, Brad Johnson. Now, Vikings fans hated him in 2006, but they might forget he was picked in the 9th round, 227 in the 1992 draft, and we ended up getting a first-round pick for him eventually from Washington that I think led to us drafting Dante Culpepper with that selection. But Johnson was a guy that we developed.
Now, here's where I run out of time making graphics.
Yeah. The last two guys that made the list. At 241, Terry Allen, running back, drafted in the 9th round, 241 in the 1990 draft, was a key guy of those early Dennis Green teams at running back. Had a couple of bad knee injuries, ended up signing with Washington and having a pretty solid career with them. I think he has almost 8,500, 8,600 total rushing yards career-wise. So Terry Allen had a really nice career, despite having a severe knee injury at Clemson, I think his last year, and then having one as in his pro career as well. But he was a very good running back for us for a couple of years, and was a very good running back for Washington, unfortunately, after that. The final guy who made the list, and this goes back to the Vikings glories days, is the best pick at 259, even though Pro Football Focus said he was picked, or Pro Football Reference said he was picked at the slot 260, not 259, but we won't argue. Ben Solak says that Stu Voigt at tight end, picked in the 10th round in the 1970 draft, is the best pick ever at slot 259. And he was a Viking and a solid contributor on some of those strong Viking teams in the early to mid 70s. So those are the 13 guys who made the team. There's a couple of spots, though, where I think there could be some debate. One of them being Solak picked his top pick at 88 was Nick Foles at quarterback. And yes, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl with the Eagles and was the Super Bowl MVP that year. But otherwise, he was a journeyman quarterback in the NFL. And Solak gave him the nod over Daniil Hunter, who has been one of the most feared pass rushers in the NFL since he entered the NFL. He's done it at a high level for over a decade now. And I would say that I would pick Daniil. And Solak said, yeah, I would say I'd pick Daniil, and I'm biased. I'm a Vikings fan, but Daniil does not have a Super Bowl ring, so I guess that was the Trump thing. But Solak said that there was no quarterback. Like he didn't bump up your value if you're a quarterback compared to another position. So I would have given it to Daniil there, not Nick Foles, but I'm not Ben Solak. The other spot where I did have a little bit of a debate was number 19. He's the top pick at number 19 is Marvin Harrison from, of course, the Indianapolis Colts, teamed up with Peyton Manning. They were a dynamic duo for a number of years. I'm not saying that Marvin should be booted out of that spot, but Randall McDaniel was picked at the same spot in 1988. And I think you could make an argument that there should be a tie there because, yes, Marvin Harrison is in the Hall of Fame, but so is Randall McDaniel. Mm-hmm. Marvin Harrison made 8 straight All-Pro teams. Randall McDaniel made 9 straight All-Pro teams. And 7 of them were first-team All-Pro. So I feel there's, yes, Marvin Harrison played a much more glamorous position, and he was, teamed up with, joined at the hip with Peyton Manning. So he played a little bit later, and so Solak would remember him more. But I feel like Randall McDaniel deserves a little bit of love there, and probably should be at least tied with Harrison as the best at the number 19 position. And of course, the other thing is that with this only going up to 1967, there's a couple of guys that didn't get considered at all. Fran Tarkenton in 61 was picked in the 3rd round at, I think, pick 29 or whatever. When he retired, he had every passing record that known to man was his. At first ballot Hall of Famer. He clearly, I think, would have been. I think Steve Wisniewski is the guy who was picked as the top at 29, where Fran would be. Fran would be in there for sure. And Carl Eller is another. He was picked, I think he was in the 65 draft picked, so he wasn't eligible, but he's another guy. He was picked 6th overall, I think, or 5th overall. He might have been somebody that would have been considered there as well. Anyway, these things are always fun, and I thought it was very interesting. There were so many Vikings on the list, and a couple that more that could have been on the list. If you think there's any Vikings there, people who are watching who maybe could have been, you think might have been the best pick at a certain slot. Yeah, Ron Yeri, although he was number 1 overall.
Right. There's a lot of number 1 picks that have gone to be very good.
And Solak gave Peyton Manning as the top number 1 overall there. I don't think you could argue with that. Mm-hmm. But there might be others, at pick 127 or 201 or whatever that the Vikings got. If you feel there is, put it in the comments whenever and let us know. We'll take a look at it.
And when I researched this, because I don't have paywall access, but I asked Grok, it said also he went beyond that, and at pick 256, he gave to Adam Thielen as an undrafted free agent as the best person picked in that slot. And sure, absolutely, I agree.
So there you go. A little bit of fun there with lists at the end.
I can't wait till this season's over.
We're getting there, Dave.
Weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll be full-blown into training camp. Yay. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you tomorrow, Tyler plans on doing a 50,000-foot view of the offense and of the defense, whether he's splitting it up, offense on Monday, defense on Thursday, or vice versa. I don't know. But that's what the plans are for this week. And just to let you know, we'll see how that goes. And, of course, if there's any news that comes up, it is the week that Jordan Addison is scheduled to appear in court.
Yes.
So expect an update on that. That's supposed to happen Tuesday. And it could go any which way. We'll see. I'm betting they'll postpone it for whatever reasons again. And that's just the way the court system works. We'll find out. But that's what I would wager on. But we'll see. So we're here for you all week. I'm glad everybody enjoyed the show. If you came in late, go back and rewatch the stuff that sounds good. I hope we got across some of the stuff that Brian Flores did and his evolution and his philosophy on playing defense. Hopefully it became clearer and everybody looks forward to it this season. Any last words, everybody?
None at all, Dave. Just thanks everybody for watching. Again, appreciate everyone who shows up and participates.
Yeah. It's going on an hour and a half. And what do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby. And I got to piss like a racehorse.
SKOL Vikings.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!